The CEO hired a fake wife to fool his mother, but her beauty left him completely stunned. What happens when a cold, calculated CEO is forced to find a fake wife to save his inheritance, only to fall for the very woman he thought he could control? This isn't just a story about power or wealth. It's about the unexpected force of love that sneaks in when you least expect it. Set against the backdrop of high-rise boardrooms and heartfelt confessions, this tale will pull you into a whirlwind of emotion, deception, and redemption. Get ready for a journey where appearances crumble and true connection takes center stage. Because sometimes pretending leads to something real. Before we begin the story, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. And subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our latest stories. Enjoy the story. The rain had just started falling over the steel bones of San Francisco when Nathaniel Wolfe's world began to splinter. It wasn't a scandal or a hostile takeover or even the failure of a billion-dollar merger that shook him. It was a woman, his own mother, and 12 razor-sharp words that left a deeper cut than any boardroom betrayal. If you're not married in 6 months, I'll cut you out completely. She said it with her usual poise, a bone china teacup in hand, lips painted in crimson, like every syllable was part of a negotiation she'd already won. Evelyn Wolfe, matriarch of the Wolfe legacy, former senator, and the queen of public perception, was never one to make empty threats. And as she stared across the glossy dining table at her son, her expression gave away nothing. But Nathan knew better. She meant it. I built this company. I don't need your foundation. Nathan shot back, eyes narrowed. No, Nathan, she replied, placing the teacup down with haunting grace. But you built it with my name. And names matter more than numbers in this world. He didn't flinch, but something in him shifted. Evelyn continued. The Wolfe Foundation is the heart of this family's legacy. Your sister dreamed it. You gave it power. But what use is power if no one inherits it? No one remembers a man who dies alone with a stock portfolio and no one to cry at his funeral. Nathan's jaw locked. She had crossed a line. Mentioning Abigail, his sister, the only person he had truly loved, the only person who'd understood him, was a move that felt both cruel and brilliant. Because it worked. She rose from her seat. I don't care if it's real or for show, Nathaniel. But I expect to shake hands with your wife by Christmas, and she better look like she belongs. And just like that, she was gone, her designer heels clicking down the hallway like the final ticks of a doomsday clock. Nathan was left alone in the grand, cold silence of his mansion. Outside, the rain hammered against the windows like a warning. Marriage, love, those were illusions. Like smoke on glass, pretty for a moment, then gone. His childhood had taught him better. His father, once a powerful media tycoon, had shattered every belief in forever the night he walked out on their family and left Evelyn in tears Nathan had never forgotten. That's when he learned. Love was weakness. Love was vulnerability. And vulnerability, it killed. But still. Evelyn was right about one thing. The Wolfe Foundation wasn't just his work. It was Abigail's dream. And if keeping it meant bending his own rules, even fabricating an entire marriage, then maybe, just maybe, it was a price worth paying. He didn't need a soulmate. He needed an actress. A quiet, ordinary woman who wouldn't attract attention or emotions. Someone who could be coached, polished, shaped into the perfect illusion. Then, as if summoned by fate, he saw her. It was nothing more than a detour. His driver took a wrong turn near Golden Gate Park. Nathan had insisted they stop for coffee, and there she was, standing behind the counter of a tiny bookshop cafe, unaware of the storm her mere existence was about to create. She wore no makeup, her hair tucked into a messy bun, her eyes focused on a worn paperback as she handed a latte to a customer. She looked real, disarming, invisible to most, but not to Nathan. He didn't know her name, not yet, but he knew this: she was the one. And whether she realized it or not, she was about to become Mrs. Wolfe. A storm had just begun, and she was at the center of it. If that caught your breath, just wait until you see what comes next. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, because the rest of this story will break your heart and mend it again, one chapter at a time. The next morning, Nathaniel Wolfe stood by the window of his corner office in the Wolfe Industries building, the city stretching beneath him like a map of battles won. But for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about mergers or quarterly earnings. His mind replayed the image of the young woman in the cafe. Her calm demeanor, the soft way she looked at a book as if it held secrets the world had missed. He didn't know why she lingered in his thoughts. She wasn't his type. If he even had a type, he wasn't interested in romance, in unpredictable emotions that dulled the clarity of reason. But something about her was different. There was a quietness to her presence that haunted him, and that haunted feeling was enough to make him act. By noon, his assistant, Grace, had compiled a full profile. "Her name is Clara Bennett," she reported, placing the file gently on his desk. 31. Runs a small, independent bookstore cafe in Hayes Valley called Chapters and Brew. Former English major at Berkeley. Dropped out in her final year due to her father's illness. No criminal record. No close family. Parents passed. No siblings. Keeps a low profile. Credit score's decent. She's ordinary. Nathan flipped through the file, scanning facts, photos, bank statements. It should have ended there. A woman with nothing to gain and everything to lose was perfect for his plan. But as he stared at her handwriting on a scanned customer receipt, something tugged at him. It was elegant, careful, like someone who still wrote letters in a world that forgot how. That evening, dressed in a sharp charcoal coat and his usual cold confidence, Nathan entered Chapters and Brew. It was small, cozy, the air filled with the comforting scent of cinnamon, books, and espresso. Soft indie music hummed from speakers tucked between shelves. Clara stood behind the counter, her hair pinned back loosely, her eyes scanning a notebook filled with scribbles. She didn't notice him until he was at the register. He ordered an Americano. She looked up, recognition flickering in her eyes, but not the kind he expected. Not awe, not fear, just curiosity. "You came back," she said simply. Nathan didn't respond immediately. He hadn't rehearsed this part. "I have a business proposal for you," he said at last. Clara blinked. "I thought you came for coffee." "I did, and for something else." She waited, brows slightly raised. "I need you to pretend to be my wife," he said. The words hung in the air, ridiculous and raw, like a misplaced line in a script she never auditioned for. "I'm sorry." "What?" she asked, almost laughing. "I'll explain everything," he said, voice firm, controlled. "You'll be compensated generously, all expenses paid, a contract, 1 year, just until Christmas. She stared at him, uncertain whether he was joking or deeply unhinged. "Why me?" "Because you're believable," he answered without hesitation. "You're grounded. You're not from my world, which makes you perfect for it." Clara narrowed her eyes. "So you want me to lie for money? To play a role?" "It's not just a role. It's a deal. A temporary arrangement with clear boundaries. No real marriage. No obligations except appearances." She crossed her arms. "And why should I trust you?" "Because I'm not offering love. I'm offering clarity, security, and a year without financial worry." Clara's expression shifted. He saw it then. The hesitation, the struggle behind her eyes. She was proud, but exhausted, independent, but backed into a corner by circumstance. He didn't need to know her full story to see the weight she carried. Still, she didn't answer. She simply handed him the coffee, her fingers brushing his for a fraction of a second. "I'll think about it," she said. Nathan nodded once and turned to leave. As he stepped out into the cooling night, the scent of roasted beans still in his coat, he felt something strange. Not victory, not relief. Something more dangerous. Anticipation. It took Clara 3 days to make her decision. 3 days of closing the cafe a little earlier, turning down invitations from friends, and standing in her tiny apartment staring out the window at the streets of San Francisco that once held all her dreams and now seemed strangely muted. She thought about the bills stacked on her kitchen table, the repairs her bookstore needed, the emails she hadn't answered from landlords and banks, and she thought about the man in the charcoal coat, Nathaniel Wolfe, with eyes that could freeze or burn depending on his purpose. She wasn't naive. She knew men like him didn't come into her life for no reason. But she also wasn't afraid. Clara had learned to live with uncertainty. She had faced harder decisions than this. The real question wasn't whether she could pretend to be his wife. It was whether she could afford not to. On the 4th day, she walked into the towering glass building of Wolfe Industries and stepped into an elevator that seemed too quiet for its size. Her reflection stared back at her from mirrored panels. Hair neatly tied, face composed, outfit simple but clean. No makeup, no perfume. Just Clara, as she was. She didn't dress to impress. She came to negotiate. When the elevator opened, Nathaniel's assistant led her through a corridor lined with abstract art and silence. His office was at the end, sunlit and immaculate, more like a museum than a workspace. He stood behind his desk, his back to the window, expression unreadable as always. "You came," he said. "I thought you'd want an answer in person." He gestured for her to sit. She didn't. "I'll do it," she said quietly, "under a few conditions." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "1," she began. "I won't change who I am. Don't expect me to wear a mask every hour of the day. 2, I'm not your employee. This is a partnership. And 3, you don't get to control my life outside of this arrangement. If you want a woman who'll disappear behind your image, find someone else." A flicker of something passed through his gaze. Amusement? Respect? She couldn't tell. Agreed. He said simply, like he'd already known she would ask for those terms. "I'll have my legal team draw up the contract." "And one more thing," Clara added. "No physical affection unless absolutely necessary. I'm not a trophy. I'm not decoration." Nathan paused, then nodded. Understood. The contract was signed that evening. It felt oddly anticlimactic, like the end of a chess match where both players already knew who would win. Nathan handed her a black card and a set of keys. "You'll move into my home in Pacific Heights tomorrow. My mother is visiting in 2 weeks. She'll expect to see signs of a real marriage, shared routines, photographs, harmony. We'll need to rehearse." Clara nodded, though the word rehearse made her chest tighten. "You'll also need to attend a gala next Friday. Black tie. I'll have a stylist visit." She looked up sharply. "I don't need a stylist. I know how to dress myself." Nathan didn't argue, but his smile was faintly amused. "As you wish." When Clara left that night, the city looked different. It felt like she had just stepped into a play she hadn't auditioned for, but somehow had landed the lead role in. She knew it wouldn't be easy, pretending to love a man she barely knew, convincing his powerful, watchful mother, living in a home where nothing belonged to her. But more than that, Clara feared something else, something she didn't want to name yet. It was the way Nathan had looked at her when she pushed back, the way he hadn't flinched, the way he listened. That was the dangerous part, not the contract, not the lies, the possibility that something real might start to grow inside a lie. Clara stood in the doorway of Nathaniel Wolfe's mansion the next evening, holding her breath as the massive iron gate slid closed behind her. The estate was nothing short of breathtaking, tucked away in the hills of Pacific Heights, wrapped in silence, elegance, and a kind of loneliness that no architecture could hide. It wasn't just a house, it was a fortress, a statement. And somehow, it felt more like a museum than a home. A butler greeted her with a quiet nod, then disappeared after showing her to her room. Not their room, her room. It was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows, white walls, and sleek furniture that looked untouched. Clara placed her bag gently on the velvet armchair and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process the surreal reality of it all. She was here, in this house, as someone's wife, pretend or not. Later that night, Nathan appeared at her door without knocking, his usual composure intact, but his voice gentler than she expected. "Dinner is in 20 minutes. My mother called. She's arriving early. Tomorrow." Clara blinked. "Tomorrow? You said 2 weeks." She moved up her plans. "She's suspicious, and she's thorough." Clara stood slowly, absorbing the weight of that statement. "So this starts now." Nathan nodded. "We'll need to present a united front. I'll brief you during dinner." Downstairs, the dining room was bathed in warm golden light. A long mahogany table stretched across the room, but only 2 places were set. Clara was surprised to find that despite the grandeur of the home, dinner was quiet, intimate even. A private chef brought in a beautifully plated meal, and Nathan poured wine himself. She expected him to lecture her on etiquette, on schedules, on appearances, but instead he asked, "What do you like to read?" Clara, mid-sip, looked at him with narrowed eyes. "Is this part of the act?" "No, I'm genuinely asking. If we're going to be convincing, I should know the things that make you who you are." She hesitated, then answered honestly, "Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath, anything that cuts deep and makes no apology for it." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "That explains a lot. And you?" she asked, not because she expected a real answer, but because something about the moment felt unexpectedly human. I read balance sheets, he replied with a trace of irony, and court depositions. Clara gave a small laugh. Romantic. There was a pause, not awkward, but thoughtful, as if both of them recognized the strangeness of this moment, sitting across from someone who would tomorrow become their partner in a lie. And yet here they were, talking like two people who had maybe, just maybe, met under different circumstances. After dinner, Nathan escorted her to the study, where an entire wall had been covered in what could only be described as a relationship storyboard. Photoshopped images of them at events, forged travel itineraries, text message transcripts, all neatly arranged in folders. My mother will investigate thoroughly, Nathan said. These are details we'll need to know. She'll ask about how we met, your favorite flowers, my habits. We need consistency. Clara stared at the web of fiction stretched before her. So we rehearse a love story. Yes, he said. A believable one. And when she leaves? Clara asked, meeting his eyes. His expression flickered, barely perceptible, but there. We go back to our own lives, but something in his tone betrayed the fragility of that answer, because neither of them knew what they were stepping into. They were threading a needle with secrets and pretending it was thread. That night, Clara lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. The way Nathan had pulled out her chair, the flicker of warmth when she said she liked tragic poetry, the careful distance he kept, like a man used to holding the world at arm's length, and slowly forgetting how to invite anyone in. She reminded herself, again and again, this wasn't real, but it was starting to feel too carefully made to be completely false. The next morning arrived with the air thick with expectation. Clara stood by the window in her modest but elegant cream dress, her fingers nervously adjusting the buttons at her wrist. Outside, a sleek black car pulled through the iron gates. Nathan's mother, Nathaniel Wolfe, had arrived. Clara had seen photos of her before. Magazine spreads, business features, society columns. But nothing could prepare her for the sheer presence of the woman now stepping out of the car. Nathaniel Wolfe was power-dressed in a navy suit with pearl earrings and an aura that could silence a room. Her gaze was sharp, critical, the kind of look that measured people not by their words, but by their smallest hesitations. Clara took a deep breath as footsteps echoed through the marble foyer. Nathan greeted his mother at the door with a kiss on the cheek. "Mother," he said warmly, "welcome home." Eleanor's eyes swept over her son, and then landed on Clara, pausing with unmistakable scrutiny. "So," she said slowly, "this is the woman who convinced my son to wear color in a family photo." Clara smiled with practiced grace. "Only because your son told me your favorite color was navy." That seemed to disarm Eleanor, if only slightly. "I see you've done your homework." As introductions shifted to the living room, Clara followed the cues Nathan had laid out for her during their long rehearsal. She knew the script. Where they met, a book launch at the Huntington Library, how they fell in love, a 6-hour conversation over whiskey and poetry, and their whirlwind decision to marry after realizing life was too short for hesitation. But it was one thing to rehearse it. It was another thing entirely to look into the eyes of Nathan's mother and say it like it was the only truth that mattered. Over tea, Eleanor asked questions, some polite, others strategically veiled in skepticism. "And what was it about my son that won you over so quickly?" Clara sipped her tea with measured calm. He didn't try to charm me. He didn't pretend. He just showed up, in all his sharp edges and silence, and something about that felt more honest than anything else. Eleanor's brow lifted. You're not what I expected. Clara didn't flinch. Neither was he. The conversation moved on, but something shifted in that moment. Clara could feel it. Eleanor wasn't convinced, not yet, but she was curious now. That was a start. Later that evening, after Eleanor had retreated to her guest suite, Clara sat alone in the study, reviewing the notes Nathan had left her. She could still feel Eleanor's gaze, the way she searched for cracks in the story. Clara was good at playing roles. Years of surviving life had taught her that. But there was something about this one that was beginning to feel less like acting. She was still lost in thought when Nathan entered, loosening his tie. His usual composed demeanor was tinged with exhaustion. You did well today, he said, grabbing a bottle of scotch from the cabinet and pouring 2 glasses. Clara looked up. She doesn't trust me. No, he admitted. But she doesn't trust anyone. The fact that she didn't interrogate you about your credit score or birth certificate is practically an endorsement. Clara gave a tired laugh. How long do you think we can keep this up? Nathan leaned against the edge of the desk, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Long enough, but the silence that followed said more than either of them wanted to admit. This arrangement, neat and well scripted as it was becoming something else. Not just a cover, not just an illusion, but a stage neither of them fully understood how to step off from. Clara looked at Nathan, studying the way the warm lamplight softened his features. He was more than the man in the headlines, more than the control-obsessed executive she had agreed to fake a life with. He had shadows behind his eyes, layers that didn't match the version of him the world worshipped or feared. And though she couldn't explain it, she felt herself drawn to those shadows. Not to fix him, but maybe to understand him. Tell me something real, she said quietly. Something not in the script. Nathan hesitated, the glass halfway to his lips. I don't like the sound of wind chimes, he said finally. They remind me of the night my father left. Clara blinked. She hadn't expected that. And she hadn't expected the ache that settled in her chest at his words. Thank you, she whispered. For the first time, he looked at her without the armor. Don't thank me yet. And for a moment, just a moment, this story they were pretending to live in felt more real than either of them could have anticipated. The days that followed became a blur of carefully choreographed routines, family dinners, charity events, photo opportunities, each designed to feed the illusion that Nathan Wolfe and Clara Hart were blissfully married. But behind the scenes, something had started to change. The lines of performance and reality were beginning to blur, not only for the world watching them, but for Nathan and Clara themselves. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon that the rhythm of their performance faltered. Clara had spent the morning helping with event arrangements for the Wolfe Foundation's annual fundraiser. She wasn't expected to take part in the planning. No one had asked her to, but she had wanted to. Perhaps it was an unconscious attempt to feel like more than a prop in someone else's story. She had just returned to the mansion, soaked from a sudden downpour, strands of damp hair clinging to her face. Nathan was standing at the top of the staircase, his expression unreadable as he watched her step inside. You look like a drowned cat, he said flatly, but there was a glimmer of amusement in his voice. Clara shook her head, water droplets spraying from her coat. You're welcome, by the way. Your gala won't fall apart this year. I personally threatened 3 caterers and charmed your florist into giving you a 30% discount. Nathan came down the stairs slowly, his gaze softening as he reached her. You didn't have to do that. Clara shrugged, brushing wet hair out of her eyes. I know. But I wanted to. I was tired of feeling like an accessory. There was a beat of silence. Nathan reached out and gently pulled a stray leaf from her coat, his fingers brushing her shoulder. You've never been just an accessory, Clara. The words settled between them like a delicate thread, fragile but undeniable. That evening, Eleanor joined them for dinner. It was a rare occasion when she chose to eat in the formal dining room with them. The conversation drifted from board appointments to social engagements until Eleanor turned to Clara and asked, "And what are your plans after this charity season, dear? Surely you have aspirations beyond playing hostess." Clara, who had been sipping her wine, felt her throat tighten. She hadn't thought about after. She hadn't dared to. Before she could answer, Nathan cut in. Clara has been helping restructure the Foundation's outreach programs. Her insights have been invaluable. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, surprised, but intrigued. Is that so? Clara nodded slowly, surprised herself. Yes, I used to study nonprofit management before life took a different turn. Eleanor studied her for a long moment before nodding. It suits you. Don't waste that mind, Clara. The Wolfe name can open doors, but what you do once they open, that's entirely on you. It wasn't a compliment, not exactly, but coming from Eleanor, it was close. Later, as Clara stood by the terrace watching the rain fall beyond the warm glow of the dining room, Nathan joined her in the quiet. She sees you now, he said softly. Clara didn't turn to him. I wasn't trying to impress her. I know, he said. That's why you did. She finally looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. What happens when this ends, Nathan? The question caught him off guard. Not because he didn't have an answer, but because he wasn't sure he wanted to say it aloud. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe it doesn't. Clara's heart thudded. She searched his face, but the usual mask was gone. All that remained was a man who had built his life around control and was now beginning to lose control in the most unexpected way. Nathan reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. This was supposed to be pretend, he said, but you've made it feel more real than anything I've known. The words landed heavily, and Clara didn't know whether to lean into them or run. Every instinct she had screamed caution, but her heart, her tired, foolish heart, had already begun to believe. So, for the first time, she didn't pull away. The morning after their quiet conversation on the terrace, Clara woke earlier than usual. Sunlight streamed through the grand windows of the Wolfe estate, painting golden streaks across the marble floor. She lay still for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts. Her hand instinctively drifted toward the side of the bed Nathan had used to sleep in the night before. It was cold and untouched. He hadn't come to bed. There was a certain ache that followed the realization, though Clara couldn't quite name it. They had shared something fragile the night before, an almost confession, a moment that cracked open a wall between them. But Nathan had pulled away, as if frightened by the vulnerability. Later that day, Clara busied herself with the final preparations for the gala. The Wolfe Foundation's biggest event of the year was hours away, and guests from across the country were already arriving in Manhattan. She moved through the venue like a seasoned host, coordinating with the staff, ensuring every table setting was perfect, every arrangement in place. She needed the distraction, When Nathan arrived, he looked as polished as ever in his tailored tuxedo, but his eyes searched the room until they found her. Clara, standing under the grand chandelier, laughed with a group of donors, but the light in her eyes dimmed slightly when she saw him approach. "You've outdone yourself," Nathan said quietly as he reached her side. Clara offered a practiced smile. "It's what I signed up for, isn't it?" He caught the edge in her voice and frowned. "About last night? It's fine," she said quickly, too quickly. "I understand. We're keeping up appearances." He didn't correct her. Instead, he slipped his hand around her waist, guiding her toward the ballroom entrance where photographers waited. The flashes exploded around them, and Clara's smile was perfect, effortless. No one could guess that inside. She felt like she was unraveling. Midway through the evening, as the orchestra played and laughter echoed beneath the crystal ceiling, Nathan stepped away to take a call. Clara watched him from across the room, noting the stiffness in his posture, the way his voice dropped. Moments later, he returned with a distant look in his eyes. "What is it?" she asked. "My mother," he replied tersely. "She's coming tonight." Clara's breath caught. "You said she was in London." "She changed her mind." The weight of Eleanor Wolfe's presence always shifted the energy in a room, and when she arrived, regal in a midnight blue gown, that shift was palpable. Guests murmured as she entered. Her gaze swept the ballroom like a hawk before settling on Clara. With deliberate grace, Eleanor approached. Clara straightened, summoning every ounce of composure she possessed. "Clara," Eleanor said coolly, "you've done an exceptional job." Clara blinked. "Thank you." Eleanor's expression remained unreadable. "And how has married life been treating you lately?" Clara's lips parted, but Nathan spoke before she could. "It's been good. Better than I expected." There was something genuine in his voice, something that made Clara's stomach flutter against her will. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, as if reading too much in their exchange. As the evening wore on, Clara found herself on the terrace again, away from the noise and the performance. She didn't hear Nathan approach, but she felt it when he stopped beside her. "I didn't mean to leave you alone last night," he said. She looked at him, unsure of what to say. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "I kept thinking about what you said, about what happens after." Clara exhaled slowly. "I don't want to keep pretending if it's going to hurt more." Nathan hesitated. Then, in a voice quieter than she'd ever heard from him, he said, "It stopped being pretend a long time ago for me." Clara turned toward him, her heart pounding. "But I don't know how to be what you deserve," he added, voice heavy with something between fear and sincerity. "I'm not used to letting people in, Clara, but with you, I want to try." Her response was a long silence. Then softly, "You don't need to be perfect, Nathan. You just have to be honest." He reached for her hand again, the same way he had before. But this time, she met him halfway. And in that stillness, under the dark velvet sky, something between them finally began to feel real. The morning after the gala felt different. The city still buzzed outside the windows of the Wolfe estate, but inside, time seemed to move slower, heavier. Clara sat alone at the edge of the bed in the guest suite she had moved back into, tracing the rim of a porcelain teacup with her finger. She hadn't returned to the master bedroom after the gala, even though Nathan had silently offered. There was too much unsaid between them, and yet too much had already been felt. She replayed Nathan's words on the terrace over and over in her mind. "It stopped being pretend a long time ago. That sentence had unraveled her. It scared her more than it comforted her, because if it was real now, then everything mattered. Every look, every silence, every heartbeat. Downstairs, Nathan was pacing in his study. The fireplace remained unlit, but the room was warm with morning light. He had canceled his meetings for the day, telling his assistant he needed personal time. That alone was enough to set the office buzzing. Nathan Wolfe never took personal time. But today, he couldn't concentrate on anything else. Clara's face haunted his every thought. How her eyes had glistened with doubt when she asked him not to hurt her. How her voice trembled when she said she didn't want to pretend. He wanted to fix it. He just didn't know how. By noon, he found her in the conservatory, the one place she always seemed to go when she needed to breathe. The glass walls were fogged slightly with condensation, the plants lush and fragrant around her. Clara was curled in one of the wicker chairs, reading something she didn't seem to be absorbing. "Clara," Nathan began, his voice unsure, and for once, not the voice of a CEO or a man used to commanding every room he entered. She looked up, but didn't smile. "You've been quiet. I didn't want to push," he said honestly, "but I can't ignore this anymore." Clara shut the book gently. "Ignore what?" "Us." The word felt enormous. "What we've become." She stood, folding her arms, guarding herself. "Nathan, if we're going to have this conversation, I need you to tell me something you've never told anyone else. Something real. Something true." He hesitated, not because he didn't trust her, but because vulnerability wasn't a language he spoke fluently. Still, for her, he was willing to try. "When I was 17, he began slowly. My father made me attend a meeting the day after my dog died. I begged him not to. I cried, actually cried in front of him, and he told me to toughen up. Said no one cared about a boy who couldn't separate emotions from duty." Clara blinked, startled by the rawness of the memory. Nathan went on, voice thickening. "From that day, I decided I'd never show weakness, never let anything close enough to break me. I thought if I built a fortress around my life, I'd be untouchable. And I was. Until you." Clara's guard wavered, then cracked. "And what happens now?" He stepped closer, voice gentler than she'd ever heard. "Now, I take down the walls. For you." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "You make it so hard not to love you," she whispered. Nathan reached for her hand, bringing it to his chest. "Then don't fight it." They stood there, breathing in sync, surrounded by green life and morning light. It wasn't a grand declaration or some passionate kiss. It was quieter, stronger, real. But the peace didn't last. Later that afternoon, as Clara prepared to go to her sister's art exhibit, a small event she had committed to weeks earlier, she received an envelope hand-delivered by a courier. Inside was a single sheet of paper, embossed with the Wolfe family crest. Her heart dropped as she read the contents. Eleanor Wolfe was summoning her, alone. Clara didn't tell Nathan. She didn't want to start a war or drag him into another confrontation. Maybe, she thought, Eleanor was finally ready to see who she really was, not as a contract bride, but as the woman who truly loved her son. She arrived at Eleanor's estate that evening, nerves twisting inside her. The butler led her into the formal sitting room, where Eleanor stood by the fireplace, a glass of red wine in hand. "I appreciate your punctuality," Eleanor said, not looking up. Clara nodded. You asked to see me. Eleanor finally turned, her expression unreadable. You've become important to Nathan. Clara said nothing, sensing there was more. I don't know if I trust that importance, Eleanor continued, stepping closer. Or if you're the right kind of woman for this family. Clara held her ground. I never asked to be judged, but I did fall in love with your son, long before I even realized it. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, as if surprised by the admission. I'm not here to win your approval, Clara added, voice trembling but steady. But I won't walk away from him. Not anymore. The silence between them felt endless. Finally, Eleanor spoke again, softly this time. Let's hope he's strong enough to fight for you too. And with that, Clara left the estate, her heart both heavier and strangely more certain. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew she wasn't pretending anymore. That night, Nathan waited. He sat in the lounge, a glass of scotch untouched in his hand, the fire in the hearth casting golden flickers across the room. Time moved slowly, as if the universe was holding its breath. The clock ticked louder than usual, echoing his own restlessness. Clara had been gone for hours. She hadn't told him where she was going, only that she needed to handle something. But he knew. He could feel it. It had something to do with his mother. When the door finally opened and Clara walked in, she looked tired, her eyes rimmed with something deeper than exhaustion. Nathan stood immediately, his chest tight. Where were you? He asked, voice lower than he intended. Clara didn't answer at first. She placed her purse down gently on the console table, then turned to face him. I went to see your mother. His jaw clenched. Alone. I needed to, she said. There were things that had to be said. By me. Nathan took a step toward her. She didn't threaten you again, did she? No, Clara said, and then paused. Not exactly. She questioned everything about me, about us. She wanted to know if I was worth the legacy you've built. Nathan's heart pounded with anger. You don't have to prove yourself to her, or to anyone. I wasn't trying to prove myself, Clara said softly. I just told her the truth. That I love you. That I'm not going anywhere. His eyes searched hers, slowly softening. And what did she say? She didn't say much, but she listened. Clara stepped forward. Nathan, I don't want to live in fear of being dismissed. By your mother, by your past, by this whole arrangement. I'm tired of pretending I'm only here because of some contract. I stayed because I fell for you. And if you feel even a fraction of what I do, then we need to stop living like we're waiting for it all to fall apart. Nathan closed the distance between them. He didn't touch her yet, just looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd never had the courage to ask. I do feel it, he whispered. All of it. Clara, you changed everything. For a long moment, they simply stood there. The room fell away. The weight of expectations, of old fears, of uncertain futures, all of it dissolved in the space between them. And then Nathan reached into his coat pocket. Clara blinked as he drew out a small velvet box. What is that? Nathan looked at her, his voice steady. It was supposed to be for the end of the contract, a way to thank you. But now, I can't bear the idea of this being tied to any kind of deal. He opened the box. Inside sat a delicate ring, simple and elegant, with a sapphire that gleamed like a piece of the night sky. There's no contract now, no obligation, no performance, just this, just me, asking you to stay. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Clara's eyes filled with tears. You're asking me to marry you. For real? Yes, Nathan said. For real. For every imperfect, unpredictable, messy, beautiful day to come. She took a trembling breath. Then she laughed, wiping at her cheeks. This is insane. I never saw this coming. Neither did I, he admitted. But I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Clara stared at him, at the man who had once been a symbol of everything cold and calculated in her world. Now, here he was, completely open, unguarded, asking for her heart without armor. She took the ring, slid it onto her finger, and whispered, Yes. The moment was quiet. No applause, no champagne. Just two people, standing in the middle of a life they hadn't meant to build, realizing it had become more real than anything they'd planned. Later that night, as they sat by the fire with hands intertwined, Nathan spoke again. I want to tell the truth. To everyone. No more secrets. No more contracts. Clara nodded. We'll do it together. And for the first time, Nathan Wolfe felt truly free. Not from responsibility, but from the loneliness he'd never been able to name. Because now, he didn't have to carry the future alone. Clara was beside him, and this time, she was there not because of obligation, but because love had quietly, powerfully rewritten everything. It rained on the morning of the event, as if the sky couldn't quite decide whether to bless or question the day's unfolding. Soft streaks of water traced the tall glass windows of Wolfe Industries, where dozens of staff and media waited for an announcement that had been teased for weeks. Inside the marble lobby, a new kind of electricity hummed, different from the usual sharp intensity of stock predictions or boardroom conquests. This was something warmer, something more human. Nathan stood in front of the mirror in his office, adjusting his tie not out of vanity, but nervous anticipation. Clara appeared behind him, her reflection joining his in the glass. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder, grounding him the way she always did without saying much. Are you ready? She asked. Nathan turned around, his expression serious, though his eyes softened at the sight of her. For the first time in my life, yes. Together, they stepped into the main hall, where press cameras blinked and employees murmured. A podium had been placed in the center of the room. Behind it, a banner read, Wolfe Industries, Rewriting the Future. Nathan stepped up first, but this time he didn't stand alone. Clara was beside him, not hidden away, not presented as a prop, but standing in full view. His equal, his partner. He cleared his throat. Good morning, he began. Today, I'm not here to present a quarterly report. I'm not here to announce a merger or acquisition. Today, I'm here to tell the truth. The room quieted. Some time ago, I made a decision rooted in calculation. I asked a woman to pretend to be my wife so that I could fulfill a requirement, one imposed by someone I love and respect deeply, my mother. At the time, I believed it was just a contract, a simple exchange. But life, as it turns out, is never simple. He glanced at Clara, who gave him the smallest nod of encouragement. What began as a lie became something more honest than anything I've known. In this woman, I found not just companionship, but a mirror to my soul. She challenged me, softened me, and ultimately helped me rediscover the parts of myself I'd buried beneath ambition. He paused, letting his words settle in the still air. Wolfe Industries was built on innovation, strength, and vision. But for too long, I forgot that the heart of any legacy lies not in power, but in people. Today, I'm not just announcing a shift in corporate policy. I'm announcing a shift in values. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. We will be implementing family-first initiatives, mental health support, flexible schedules, and a new philanthropic division led by Clara herself, focusing on education and women's empowerment. Applause began to build. And lastly, Nathan added, his voice warming, I'd like to officially introduce my wife, Clara Bennett Wolfe. Not a figure in a press release, not a placeholder, but the woman who changed everything. The room erupted, but Nathan heard only Clara's quiet breath beside him. Later that evening, they sat in the rooftop garden, watching the lights of New York flicker like stars fall into earth. Rain had stopped hours ago, leaving the air fresh and alive. Clara rested her head against his shoulder. Did you ever think it would end like this? Nathan laughed gently. No. I thought it would end in a boardroom. Maybe a Forbes cover. Definitely not with me head over heels for a woman who rearranges the kitchen and quotes Austen during arguments. She smiled. You needed rearranging. I did, he admitted. They fell into silence, the kind that only people who truly understand one another can share. What now? Clara whispered. Now, Nathan said, lacing his fingers through hers. We live. No more pretending, no more performances. Just us. As the city buzzed below and the stars took their place in the sky, the man who had once orchestrated everything down to the minute realized that love, unexpected, messy, uncontrollable, was the most profound achievement of his life, and he wouldn't trade it for anything. Nathan began this journey as a man who didn't believe in love. Power, wealth, and control were his cornerstones. Marriage, in his eyes, was nothing more than a transaction. To secure his inheritance and satisfy his mother's expectations, he crafted a perfect plan. Hire a woman to play the role of his wife, maintain appearances for a year, then walk away untouched. What he didn't anticipate was that this stranger, Clara, a struggling writer with a radiant spirit and quiet resilience, would turn his world upside down. Their relationship started on paper, with strict boundaries and mutual convenience. Ethan saw her as a necessary component of his scheme, someone beautiful enough to convince his mother, but simple enough to keep his emotions at bay. Yet with each shared dinner, late-night conversation, and vulnerable moment, those emotional walls began to crack. Clara wasn't just pretending to be his wife. She was becoming someone he genuinely cared for. Her laughter softened his hardened exterior. Her strength inspired him, and her kindness made him question everything he once valued. Nathan's transformation wasn't immediate. It came through tension, misunderstandings, and near loss. He hurt Madeline, more than once, because he was afraid to admit the truth, that somewhere along the way, he had fallen in love with her. And when she finally walked away, thinking she was just another pawn in his life of contracts and control, Nathan was forced to face the emptiness he'd created. Without her, even his empire felt meaningless. But love, when it's real, doesn't give up easily. Nathan chased her not with grand gestures, but with sincerity. He admitted his fears. He tore down the walls he had built for years. He told her he loved her, not because a contract demanded it, but because his heart did. In the end, Clara came back, not because she needed saving, but because she saw the man Nathan had become. A man who had learned to love, to trust, and to prioritize something far greater than power, human connection. So what can we learn from this story? True love, isn't built on contracts, conditions, or expectations. It grows in the quiet moments, in shared laughter, in vulnerability, in standing by someone even when it's hard. And sometimes, the most unexpected people walk into our lives to teach us who we truly are and what really matters. Here's a question for you. What do you think is more important in a relationship? A. Stability and logic. B. Emotion and vulnerability. Comment your answer below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And finally, if this story moved you, made you think, or simply made your heart flutter, please support the channel by subscribing. Your support gives us the motivation to continue creating emotional and inspiring stories just like this. Let's keep the conversation going and stay tuned for the next unforgettable tale.